story for the Southampton Days booklet, which was the theme of our heritage, which is basically colonial heritage in Southampton. It's an early settler, settled community. So I took it to mean our heritage, which going to Nick's heritage, Middle East, we raised all sorts of vegetables. And here's Nick on his garden tractor, which was why he was able to do it. He had all these little attachments and he did very well. This is a picture of Nick with his beekeeping, which was also a very, very good thing. Worked very well on the farm because bees are very necessary for pollinating vegetables. But we had grape leaves, things that would be used in Lebanese cooking. So that was a story that I wrote and was called the Southampton Ranch because one year we tried to raise a steer.
Yeah,
and the steer became frightened and ran away.
Yeah.
And we didn't find him for a long time. So eventually the cop was called and he was in somebody's backyard and this was a steer which was in a bag of bones and probably hardly fit to eat. But anyway, that was
tell me again, we had some camera issues for people watching this. What happened with the farm after Nick died? And Super Grand moved here.
I let the neighbors, the German neighbors, make a garden. And also the Dietrichs, we all tried to garden, but it was never successful because Nick did it on such a huge scale and really did a good job, knew what he was doing. He sent away for booklets, Penn State Extension Service, how to raise turkeys, and he had everything scientifically figured out. And he raised his own seedlings in a cold frame. So they tried, but they said that a lot of the vegetables were just about ready to eat, and the groundhogs would get them, or the squirrels or the rabbits would chew the seedlings. So they gave up. It didn't seem to work for them. So many years later, I had a chance to sell it to my then neighbors. Dietrichs moved away, but George and Carol wanted to buy it, and that's how they were able to develop it into a beautiful landscaped nature garden.
And what other things did you have to learn to do after Nick died?
Well, I had to learn how to spend money because he never let me write checks. The only exception was when he went overseas. He would leave the checkbook so that I could pay the bills. But I wrote in a notebook everything I spent, every drop of gasoline I put in the car, and things that I had never been in the habit of doing. So I became not efficient, but he was so good at handling the money. I had a lot to learn. And as I say, the maintenance of the car, all the things that you have to do to keep it in good running condition, I never knew existed. If I did, I was unaware of the things that you had to do. So pretty much then I was on my own, but then I, of course, had the children to take care of. And he had been a rock as far as discipline was concerned. So they knew what they could get away with, and they didn't try much. So that was difficult as far as being a parent, a single parent. You're in complete charge of what the kids do, whereas he took full charge. You know, he knew, or he wanted to know if they brought a friend home that he didn't approve of, that was the last time that kid came home. And for whatever reason, didn't like their table manners or their attitude or whatever. And he was pretty good. Basically, he was pretty good. I remember he let Gloria had a sweet 16 party. I may have told you that.
Yeah, I think you did.
And that was perfectly fun, and that was good. And when she was going off to college, he had been making her save her money, so she got a really nice wardrobe. And of course, when he was gone, the others didn't have that extra attention. But I guess in some ways I grew up I really became a mature person. But then when my mother came, she took over where he left off. She didn't approve of smoking or drinking, so that was off limits. But, there were a lot of things that were different, much different. I had a different social life because he and I only had a few different friends that we liked as couples, but we basically never did too much. Like my children now have parties and invite a lot of people, and we never did that because he was not sociable. And for whatever reason, he was fine when it was his family or guests of his selection. If he liked them, okay, then we entertained them. But mostly, it was a pretty limited thing. And of course, I had always gone to parent-teacher meetings, and I went to get the report cards. He was interested in their grades, and he helped them with their homework. He was very good that way, and patient. But no, I was completely on my own and very, very shaky about it. But I learned, that's when you get thrown into the water, so you swim.
So Supergram came and she spent part of the year here?
Part of every year until she died. But she maintained a home in Brant,
and she drove down here?
She drove, or Carlton would come with her, because in November, the weather's getting bad. So as soon as election was over, she came down.
Why election?
She had to vote. Oh my goodness, she had to vote in Brant. She probably knew half the people who were running. A lot of them are families that had lived there forever, like the Gazettas and the Chevettas and the Noteros, and a lot of them had gone to school to her, or one generation before. So they were interesting to her. So she'd want to vote, then she'd come down, Carlton would bring her, then he'd fly home, he'd take the day off from work, but then he would leave her car here, so that was good. She could go to the store, she'd go to the doctor on her own. So she was pretty independent in that way, but of course, she's like other people, when they get old, they don't have any resources. She had just a couple $100 a month Social Security. So I was glad I could take care of her, but she always managed to pay her way. And, she'd go to the store and she had this tiny notebook and she'd make a record of what she bought. And she, paid her bills, whatever she had coming in, which was practically nothing. And yeah, we got along well. I used to take her riding on weekends, and sometimes we'd go to the movies. She particularly liked Stan, who was Nick's friend from Roman Haas, the neighbor Stan and Joe. We loved to have them come for dinner because they were very appreciative, and she liked to tell them stories and reminisce. And Stan was just as bad. He loved to talk about the old days and when he worked at the meatpacking factory and how wonderful the sausages were, and she loved that. And then we had Eleanor Campbell, who was my friend from teaching, but she had also been the school bus driver. So when I first started working, I was a substitute teacher, and we only had one car, which Nick took to work. So I had to call a cab, go to the job, which is usually Richboro, in the taxi. But then I'd ride home on the school bus with Eleanor. She would let me on the school bus, and I would ride home. At that point, I think Shelley maybe was in 6th grade. And so that Eleanor and her husband Bill was another old fuddy-duddy. He was so good, sweet-tempered, gentleman. And they'd come for dinner, and he'd like to spin a yarn or two when he was in the Navy, and he's smoking a pipe, and it was a nice evening. So that we did some entertaining that way. And as I say, I took her maybe shopping, just riding the back roads on weekends, and she did not go to church. She didn't like to go to church. she wouldn't go to church with me. She might have once or twice. When they had a memorial service for Nick, she went, but she did not like organized religion very much, so she read a little thing like the Reader's Digest called the Unity, it was Unity Christianity, based in St. Louis. They had a radio ministry, and you would send $1 a year for this little magazine, which had all sorts of positive thoughts and happy things to think about and positive hints for living. So she sat and read that practically every night, and she really lived by it.
Did you and Nick go to church most Sundays?
Well, she might go to church when we were at your father's church.
But did you and Nick, before she came to visit you?
Oh, he went a couple of times, but he only wanted to check it out because we had been going to the North and Southampton Sunday School, and he was willing to give money towards the support of the church, but he never wanted to join because basically he had been brought up in the Orthodox faith.
Right.
We were married in the Orthodox
And there was
faith.
nothing like that around here.
And most of the Congregational Church it was too plain, too like the Pilgrims. He liked all the pomp and circumstance of the Orthodox Church. A lot of gold and glitter and candles and stuff.
I see.
So he went a couple of times, but he stayed home and built the house and gardened and made furniture in the basement. That was his religion.
So Supergram came here, and that started right after Nick died.
Yeah.
And she did that until she died in 1982?
83.
83. And
Yeah.
what happened when she died in 1983?
I think it was 1983. And as I say, she was buried in Brant, and then I was alone for the first time in years.
But how did she die?
She had a heart attack.
Uh-huh. And she was here at the time, right? She
Yeah.
was still going back and forth?
Well, we met, I don't remember, I think it was summer, and I think she was too sick to drive home that year. And she had medicine to take, but I didn't have air conditioning then. And I had fans in the house, but I was still teaching, and I was going to workshops or summer school. I used to take graduate courses in the summer. I don't know what I was doing, but I was out of the house all day. So I left her with her food on a tray and her medicine on a tray and sitting in a chair near the fan. And I think that her heart had to work too hard because it was so blasted hot and humid. And Nick too. He would have benefited from air conditioning, but I never thought I could have it until years later I found out that they could use the same ductwork, which has the heating system in it. So that's also the air conditioning now, but it has heat in the winter. So she, as I say, she was suffering. Well, then she went to the hospital, but the last night she was alive, we had a party, or we invited some people to eat, have dinner, and I made a cake, and we had a thing going called Herman. Well, now Herman was similar to sourdough, where you made this concoction and you kept stirring it and adding sugar, and it would ferment. So then we had a lot of I got it at work. All the ladies at the school were making this Herman, and then it became one ingredient in your cake. So one of the variations was a pineapple, coconut, walnut cake. So you start with the Herman, which would be the same as your leavening.
Mm-hmm.
So I made the Herman with pineapple and walnuts, and it's a pretty good cake, but very moist. So the company went home, and we went to bed. And she slept in the bed that I sleep in now, and I was in what was Nick's bed. and she woke up with a terrible pain in her chest. She said, I knew I shouldn't have eaten that cake. Boy, was that heavy. Oh, I can't believe I ate that cake. It was so darn heavy and dense and solid. She thought that had given her heartburn, indigestion. Well, of course, it was a heart attack. So I got her up, I drove her to the hospital, took her to the ER, and then from there they put her into a room. So she was in the hospital for, I think, several days. And I had her car. I was out driving someplace. And I guess I didn't have cell phones then. Somehow, eventually, I got a call that, no, that's not right. I was in bed and I was ready to get up. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning. And it was Dr. Saxena, Dr. Chin from Warminster Hospital. He said, your mother is failing fast. You better get up here. So I did. Oh, and I called Ginny. We had given Ginny Grandma's car. She was out cruising around. And I called her and told her that Grandma was very, very bad. And of course, by the time I got off the phone and I got into the